this morning? All the way from the Yukon, who literally just got here, woke up this morning in the Yukon and is here now. This is how important we are. Is our next speaker, Patrick Lucas. So Patrick is a member of the Canadian Institute for Planners, an award-winning registered professional planner, settler, and aspiring ally to Indigenous communities. Patrick is passionately committed to fostering and supporting authentic reconciliation and unsettling of Turtle Island. Over the past 15 years, Patrick has had the honor of working alongside Indigenous mentors, teachers, learning the pathway to build relationships between First Nations and non-First Nations, which is based on trust and respect. As the founder of the director of the Aboriginal Youth Mountain Bike Program, Patrick has assisted numerous communities develop trails, recreation, and tourism plans, leading to enduring social and economic development while supporting the decolonization of trails and mountain biking. As I mentioned, all the way from Yukon, just got off a plane. Please put your hands together for Patrick Lucas.
Okay, thank you very much. It's an absolute honor to be here. I think this is going to be, you're going to have to bear with me today. I got asked to do this, and of course I accepted, and I quickly put together a presentation and then sent it off, and I haven't looked at it since. So this is going to be a bit like that PowerPoint improv. So if there's a couple moments where I'm like, what's that doing in there? I'll make it up as we go, but we'll get through this together. So what I wanted to share with you today is a journey that I've been on as a settler Canadian, as a non-Indigenous Canadian, really learning about what it means to live on Indigenous lands and to work towards reconciliation, what that can possibly look like. And I've been doing that with a program that I started 6 or 7 years ago called the Aboriginal Youth Mountain Bike Program. I love trails. Every trail has a story. Whether it's written by deer crossing the land, fleeing from predators, or the ancient footpaths of Indigenous peoples, it's the most oldest manifestation that we have of community, of people connecting together and creating lives and creating societies. And they're never neutral. The politics that go into how trails are created and maintained are as old as humanity. And they hold a lot of relevance today in Canada. I think it was my father one time that pointed out when I started doing this, he's like, like our people, when they first came here, they wouldn't have gotten off the beach if it hadn't been for Indigenous people showing us their paths. So in a way, it makes sense to come back and start talking about trails. And the mountain bike industry has an amazing history. It's, in a lot of ways, it mirrors and kind of echoes the settler history. You see all these old photos of people on crazy bikes riding down insane roadways and doing all kinds of neat and exciting things that we want to emulate. They make you think of like those old sepia tone pictures you would have seen of settlers back in the day. But there's another history behind that. And it's led to some of the most incredible riding experiences that you can have anywhere in the world. People come from all over the world to ride in BC. But as I said, they're not neutral, and there's a lot of history that goes into that. In 1916, there was a small group of people, a small band called the Simpcw people. They're a Secwepemc community. You may also know them as Shuswap. And they were living in near Valemount in a place called Tijon Cache, and an area that they had occupied and used for thousands and thousands of years. The Secwepemc First Nation was one of the biggest and most powerful First Nations in BC before contact. And one day in 1916, they were all living their lives by the headwaters of the Fraser, and an RCMP detachment, an Indian agent showed up and told them they could carry whatever little bit they could manage to take with them, and they forcibly relocated them and made them march 350 kilometers south to Chuchua, which is where they live today. And the reason I'm telling you this is because of this man, Tom Eustache. He's a Secwepemc man. He's from the Simpcw people, and it was his grandparents and his great-grandparents who were forced to go on that walk. And he shared this with me because at this time, I was traveling around BC trying to get this program off the ground and knowing I really wanted to get mountain biking going with Indigenous youth and Indigenous communities. And looking back on it, I think you could say I suffered from maybe a mild to severe case of white savior complex. I wanted to help First Nations people. And in a lot of ways, that's how we're kind of raised in Canada. That's how we see First Nations a lot of time. We want to help them. We want to save them. And I was definitely going through that. He used to like calling me like Dances with Wheels or Gear Owl. Little Big Tire was another one of his favorites. His daughter called me Sprockahontas. I'm not really sure where she got that, but it's cool. I went with it. Tom loves mountain biking. When I met him, he was already into mountain biking. He loved doing it, and he was always inspired to keep his kids and the youth in his community as active as possible. So he'd get them out riding and swimming and doing whatever they could to get out and reconnect with the land. And they had been building some really cool trails just above their reserve and in their territory. And he kept saying to us, like, yeah, you know, we want some help. We want to get better at building trails. We love what we're doing. But the one thing he would always say to me is like, you're not our savior, Pat. If you want to help us, if you really want to do something, you need to be thinking about what is your role in perpetuating the system that we're living in. If you want to help us, you need to start asking yourself some tough questions. And for whatever reason that I still can't figure out, he took me under his wing and he let me come to the community, and we worked with the community to come up with a trail plan for their entire traditional territory, which is runs from just north of Kamloops all the way up to the Fraser Headwaters and Mount Robson Provincial Park. And we traveled throughout their territories. We met people. We met with elders, and we listened to their stories, and they told us about their priorities. And we came up with some really cool projects, and they launched their own trail building company, which was super exciting. But the one thing they really helped me to understand and to think about is how closely tied recreation is with colonial genocide. We often think about, we're just getting out, we're riding bikes, we're just getting out, we're going for a hike. But every time we step out on the land, we are undertaking an explicit political act based on who we get our authority from, how we come to perceive our right to be there and our right to be in that space and how that impacts other people. And you look throughout Canadian history, the Oka crisis, 1989, there was a small municipality in Quebec near a Mohawk First Nation, the Kanawake, that wanted to expand a development that the Kanawake claimed as sacred. It was a burial ground. It was a place where they had buried their ancestors, and they had claimed to it for many, many years and were fighting to get that land back. And the municipality decided one day they were going to go ahead with the development. So the Mohawk blockaded it. There was the RCMP, Sûreté de Quebec came in. The police officer was shot in the face, and a huge standoff took place over the next 78 days. And for those of you who are alive at that time or remember, maybe learned about it in school, it caught the national attention, and it really brought the dysfunctional state of the relationship into the forefront at that time. And this unleashed a surge of activism across Canada. And this image came to define and really capture what our relationship was like at that time. That development that they were trying to push through was a golf course. Sun Peaks, a little closer to home. Back, I think it was in the early 2000s, I think it was a Chinese-owned company, wanted to expand Sun Peaks quite drastically. And the local First Nation, their Secwepemc community, they're related to my good friend Tom, the Nisconlith, they absolutely opposed the expansion. They said the area was sacred to them. It was where they gathered their medicines. It was home to grizzly bear. They did not want the expansion to go through. They blockaded, they camped out on the land for months, and many people were arrested and sent to jail. And that development went through. And that's now a very popular mountain bike area. Guffiston Lake, also known as Chapatin. This is another Secwepemc community. Now this is a bit different because this situation involved a group of Secwepemc people who had been using a site for decades as a place where they practiced their cultural activities. They had a sweat lodge and they did various types of ceremonies. It was sacred to them. And after a dispute with a local landowner, the RCMP were sent in to expel them and eject them from the land. And they set up a blockade. There was a standoff that lasted weeks. The RCMP were recorded actually as saying, yeah, we specialize in smear campaigns. And they were, trying to make the First Nations look as bad as they possibly could. At one point, they shot somewhere in the neighborhood of 70,000 rounds of ammunition at the activists. And many of these people, this is Wolverine, he was one of the main elders that was involved. I believe he ended up in prison. So this is a sense where they were trying to engage in activities that they had been undertaking for thousands of years. Could you imagine something like this happen if a bunch of rogue mountain bikers are building an illegal trail and refuse to leave it one day? It's different. And they're paying with it with their bodies and their lives. So we worked with SIMC. As I said, they for whatever reason, they decided to keep me on. And we met with elders, and we met with the families, and we met with the youth, and we walked the land, and we figured out where would they want to build trails that would serve their purposes. I always kept saying to them, it's like, forget about tourism. Let's get your kids out on the land. Let's get your elders out to your favorite berry patches and moving around and being active. So we trained up Indigenous youth crews. We actually had Mark Wood from the North Shore Mountain Bike Association out once with us. And we got youth employed over the summer building trails, a lot of different community members. Kids came out and joined us quite a few times. So we had kids who got summer jobs, who got to work throughout the year. And the result has been some of the most brilliant mountain bike trails that I've ever had the pleasure of riding. And I think anybody will tell you, whether you're a climber or you're a mountain biker or a hiker, when you really get to know a trail, you really hit it right that one time, it becomes sacred to you. It's something that really stays with you. And for the mountain bike community, for all of us within the recreation community, we need to be asking ourselves is, what is it that we want to be experiencing when we're out there? Do we want the trails that we love to ride and that we love to share with others to be built on something that involves the erasure of Indigenous culture and people from the land? That's what the Colonial Project has always been. And within the recreation community, we have a stark question that we need to ask ourselves. Do we want to perpetuate that system, or do we want to challenge it and change it? Do we want our sacred rides to actually stand for something? And the beauty of it is seeing in SIMC is seeing the kids who are getting out riding now and riding the trails. We'll do a trail celebration, and the kids will come out, and we'll have all these big, burly mountain bikers from all over BC come out, professionals, and these kids are walking around like, that's my trail. You hit that drop, it's huge, rowdy, gnarly. One of my favorite things is that in SIMC particularly, 15 women started a running club. So because when I first came to them, we first started talking to me, they said, we only have like one place to run and practice, and that's a busy road that runs right through the highway. So when we built all the trails, they're the ones who get out and run all the trails now. And we'll have community meetings where we want to plan out more trails, and all 15 aunties will show up and be like, we want trails, we want trails. The young guys want to build like big gnarly trails. I'm like, are you going to go tell your aunt that there's nowhere for them to run? Yeah, I don't think so, bud. I remember one time I walked up to we took a community hike, and we walked up to a ridgeline behind SIMC, and one of the elders was with us. It was Tom's dad, and he actually said to me, it's like, I've lived here my entire life, 67 years. I've never been up on this ridge. These communities, reserve communities, were built and designed like prisons. They were designed to keep people in and off the land, and our children are digging us out from under that. Sometime later, I think this was last year, I've been working with SIMP for 4 years, and Tom called me up, and he said, I need you to do something for me. I need you and your friend Thomas. Thomas Schoen is a great trail builder from Williams Lake who's worked with me for years. He said, I need you to come up and build an outdoor classroom for the kids. And at the time, I was kind of confused. I was like, you know how to do that? It's like, nope, I want you guys to come and do it. So we went and we built a small circle of wooden benches in a circle in the woods where he told us to put it. And a few weeks later, he invited us back again. And he said, we're taking the kids out for a ride. And we get there, and all the kids were wearing these orange shirts. Any of you familiar with Orange Shirt Day? Yeah, it's a day where they commemorate what happened in the residential schools. It's a day of awareness and sharing that history. And all the kids had orange shirts. So we took them out on a ride up into the trails, and we were met by the chief of the community and some elders. And they sat them down in the circle, and they told them about their forced relocation to Chuchua. And they told them about their residential schools. And they told them about how hard they've been fighting to gain back what was taken from them. And then we all went for a ride. And the kids were just tearing down the trails, and we were riding down the trails together, and you could feel that story shaking up through the bike and into our bodies and into our bones and into our hearts. We get to the bottom, and the kids have smiles wider than their handlebars, and they're all high-fiving. And I realized that Tom had given me a gift. He knew that I was feeling incomplete, that I needed to do something to fill that hole that so many of us are feeling in Canada when we know there's a part of our history that we haven't been taught and we haven't dealt with. And he gave me a chance to see that I could work with them, do something meaningful, and play a part in rebuilding the platform on which they are enacting their healing journey. I didn't save them, but I got to play a role in giving back something that was taken. I didn't take it. I wasn't the one who did it, but we all live that legacy, and it's something that we have to live with and we have to deal with. And that's something the entire recreation community needs to be thinking about. Every trail has a story. What's your story going to be? How are we going to work together to decolonize the recreation industry? Thank you.
Thank you. Can I take that as well?